Have you ever noticed how you can pray on time, lower your gaze, even try to quiet your mind, yet your heart still feels strangely heavy, almost sealed? What if the blockage isn't in your intention, but in what enters you every day without your attention? In the Sufi tradition, Ibn Arabi taught that the heart is not just where feelings live, it is how you perceive truth, and perception can be clouded, not by a lack of devotion but by subtle veils we rarely question. One of those veils sits quietly on our plates. We live in a world obsessed with nutrition for the body, yet almost silent about nourishment for the soul. Some foods don't just slow you down physically, they harden the heart, dull awareness, and turn prayer into a heavy task. In this reflection, we'll explore 3 kinds of food that silently weaken the spiritual heart, not as superstition, but as signs revealed through lived experience and Ibn Arabi's wisdom. Stay until the end, because understanding this doesn't just change how you eat, it can change how you feel God again. Have you ever sensed a heaviness that seemed to come from nowhere? Where are you watching from today? There is a moment many people recognize but rarely speak about. You wake before dawn, the house is quiet, the world has not yet begun asking things from you. You make wudu slowly, feeling the cold water on your skin, standing in the stillness that should feel sacred. And yet when you raise your hands to pray, something feels muted. The words come out of your mouth, but they do not seem to travel very far. Your body bows, but your heart feels distant, as if it is wrapped in a thick layer you cannot name. You may tell yourself you are tired or distracted, or that faith naturally rises and falls, but then you notice something else. After certain days, certain meals, you feel more impatient, less present, a little heavier inside. Prayer feels longer, remembrance feels forced, even silence feels uncomfortable. Have you ever noticed that? Not every heaviness announces itself loudly. Sometimes it arrives quietly, disguised as normal life, a dullness in the chest, a restlessness that doesn't go away even when you sit still, a strange emotional flatness after eating, where nothing feels particularly wrong but nothing feels alive either. Many people assume this is psychological, stress, hormones, a busy mind. And while all of that may play a role, the Sufi path asks a different question first. What is moving inside you right now, and what invited it in? Ibn Arabi and the masters of the inner path did not separate the body from the soul the way we often do today. They did not treat spiritual struggle as something that exists only in the mind. To them, the human being was one house, one system. What enters through the mouth does not stop at the stomach. It travels. It leaves traces. Think about your own life. Have you ever eaten a meal that left you strangely agitated, even though nothing bad happened that day? Or a meal that made you feel heavy, sleepy, disconnected from yourself? And then on another day, you eat something simple, nothing special, and you feel lighter, calmer, more present. Why does that happen? We rarely ask this question because we've been taught to see food only as fuel, calories, energy, something to manage for health or appearance. But the Sufis observed something quieter and far more intimate. Food changes the inner atmosphere of a person. The heaviness you feel in worship may not be a moral failure. It may not be weak faith. It may be a sign. A sign that something in your daily life is creating a fog, one that settles slowly, unnoticed, until clarity becomes difficult and stillness feels uncomfortable. In the Sufi tradition, signs are not punishments. They are invitations, gentle signals asking you to look closer, not judge yourself, to become curious instead of harsh, to listen instead of forcing. So before asking, why does my prayer feel empty? The path asks a quieter question. What has been feeding my heart? Because once you understand how the heart truly works, what it is, and how easily it is clouded, the mystery of that heaviness begins to make sense. To understand why this heaviness appears, Ibn Arabi asks us to first correct a misunderstanding. When the Sufis speak of the heart, they are not speaking about emotion alone. They are not even speaking about belief in the way we usually understand it. They are speaking about perception. The heart in this tradition is a subtle organ designed to see reality as it truly is. It is a mirror. When it is clear, truth is reflected naturally. When it is clouded, even the brightest light appears dim. This is why two people can stand in the same prayer, hear the same words, recite the same verses, yet one feels illuminated and the other feels nothing. The difference is not effort, it is clarity. Ibn Arabi explains that the heart does not become blind all at once. It becomes veiled, slowly, gently, through accumulation. And one of the most overlooked sources of this veil is what rises from the stomach. Imagine a mirror standing in open sunlight. As long as the glass is clean, the light reflects effortlessly. But now imagine breathing warm steam onto that mirror again and again. One breath does nothing, but over time, the surface fogs. The light is still there, but it can no longer be seen clearly. This is how the Sufis understood the relationship between eating and perception. What you consume does not remain confined to digestion. It transforms into energy, and that energy rises into thought, mood, emotion, and awareness. Some food creates clarity, other food creates fog, and most people live with so much fog that they forget what clarity ever felt like. This is why Ibn Arabi did not treat eating as a casual act. He treated it as an intimate exchange between the human being and the unseen. Because the stomach, in this worldview, is not a separate compartment. It is connected directly to the heart. The modern world teaches us that the physical and the spiritual are two separate rooms. The Sufis say they are the same house. If you burn something toxic in the basement, the smoke does not politely stay below. It rises. It fills the upper rooms. It reaches the prayer space. And no amount of decoration upstairs can undo what is happening below. This explains something many people struggle with but rarely name. You can improve your discipline, increase your prayers, read more, listen to more lectures, and still feel a strange resistance inside, a lack of sweetness, a dullness that refuses to lift. The problem is not that your heart has lost its ability to see. The problem is that it has been asked to see through layers of fog. And fog is not removed by force. It is removed by understanding where it comes from. This is why Ibn Arabi emphasizes awareness before effort. You cannot polish a mirror if you do not first realize it is dirty. And you cannot protect the heart if you do not know what harms it. So when the Sufi masters spoke about foods that harden the heart, they were not speaking metaphorically. They were describing a lived reality, one that expresses itself in impatience, numbness, distraction, and spiritual fatigue. Once you see the heart as a mirror, everything changes. The question shifts from, "Why am I not feeling anything?" to something far more revealing. What have I been allowing to rise inside me, day after day, without noticing? And this is where the first and most subtle of the three foods reveals itself. The first food that weakens the spiritual heart is not always something you can see on the plate. It often looks clean, normal, even healthy. This is the food that comes from a doubtful source. Ibn Arabi and the Sufi masters taught that provision is never neutral. What feeds your body also carries the story of how it reached you, the intention behind it, the means through which it was earned, the harm or honesty involved along the way. We are used to looking at food only as an object. An apple is an apple, bread is bread. But Ibn Arabi asks you to look deeper, to see the unseen lineage behind what you consume. Think of money for a moment. Money is not just paper or numbers. It is condensed effort, time, intention. When money is earned through deception, exploitation, or harm to others, that distortion does not disappear when it changes hands. It carries a weight. And when that money is exchanged for food, the food absorbs that weight. You may eat the meal and feel physically fine. Your body digests it without complaint. But something else happens quietly. The heart reacts. Have you ever noticed how certain comforts bring rest to the body, but unrest to the soul? A person increases their income, upgrades their lifestyle, fills their kitchen with abundance, yet becomes sharper in speech, less patient with family, more restless in prayer. Nothing obvious is wrong, yet peace feels strangely absent. This is not coincidence. The Sufis describe this as kaswa, the hardening of the heart, not a dramatic collapse of faith, but a gradual stiffening. Empathy becomes dull, tears come less easily. The conscience grows quieter. You hear reminders, but they do not move you. Ibn Arabi explains that when food is purchased with provision earned through harm or dishonesty, it acts like a sedative on the heart. It does not shock you awake. It puts you to sleep. Your tongue may recite words of peace, but the energy circulating in your body tells a different story. The heart becomes conflicted, receiving mixed signals. It tries to remember God while being fueled by something that emerged from forgetting Him. Imagine a builder constructing a house of worship. The design is beautiful, the intention is sincere, but the bricks are made of dust and ash. No matter how skilled the architect, the structure cannot stand. Your prayers, your charity, your remembrance, these are the architecture of your spiritual life. But what you eat provides the bricks. If the bricks are unstable, the structure wobbles. This is why Ibn Arabi placed such emphasis on the purity of provision, not as a legal obsession, but as spiritual protection. Because the heart is sensitive, it knows when something does not belong. In modern life, this can feel uncomfortable to face. We live in systems that reward shortcuts, pressure compromise, and normalize ethical gray areas. But the heart keeps score even when the mind tries not to. And here is the quiet danger. Once the heart is dulled by doubtful provision, the next veil becomes harder to detect. Numbness begins to feel normal. Restlessness becomes familiar. You stop questioning the heaviness because it has been there for so long. This is why the first food is so dangerous. It does not announce itself as poison. It enters politely, dressed as success, comfort, or necessity. But once it settles, it creates a veil. And behind that veil, the second food finds the heart already defenseless. The second food that weakens the spiritual heart is not forbidden by name. It is praised by culture, encouraged by routine, and practiced almost without thought. It is the habit of eating until you are full. Ibn Arabi and the sages of the path observed something that modern life rarely pauses to notice. The state of fullness changes the inner climate of a person, not in a dramatic way, but in a quiet, reliable one. When the stomach is constantly filled, the heart grows heavy. Think about your own experience. After a large meal, what usually follows? The body relaxes, the limbs feel heavier, the mind slows down, attention drifts, even good intentions lose momentum. There is nothing sinful in this. It is simply how the body responds. But the Sufis were not only observing the body, they were watching what happened to awareness. They described the stomach as a pot beneath the heart. When that pot is filled to the brim and kept constantly boiling, thick steam rises upward. That steam enters the space of thought and feeling, creating a kind of inner drowsiness. You are awake, but your heart is not fully present. This is why a person can sincerely intend to pray, to reflect, to remember, and still feel an invisible resistance. The will is there, but the inner energy is scattered. Ibn Arabi warned that this is not just gluttony in the obvious sense. The danger lies in the habit of extinguishing hunger completely, eating until the appetite disappears, never leaving space. Because space is essential for perception. In the spiritual anatomy, emptiness is not deprivation. It is receptivity. Just as silence allows sound to be heard, lightness allows meaning to be felt. When the body is always full, it becomes heavy and earthbound. The heart follows. Subtle awareness dulls. Desire becomes louder. Patience shortens. Irritation rises more quickly. These changes feel psychological, but they begin physically. The Sufis spoke of the human being as a meeting place between two tendencies, one inclined toward light and one inclined toward appetite. When the appetite is constantly satisfied and strengthened, it dominates. The quieter voice of the heart is drowned out. This is why fullness affects worship so directly. You stand to pray, but the body wants rest. You try to focus, but the mind drifts. The heart feels distant, as though separated by a layer of weight. And the deception of this food is that it feels comforting. It soothes anxiety. It offers a sense of safety. But over time, it builds a wall of heaviness that separates the heart from clarity. Moderation in this tradition was never about restriction for its own sake. It was about leaving room for breath, for spirit, for awareness to circulate freely. In modern life, this is made more difficult by constant grazing, snacks between meals, eating while distracted, never allowing the body to settle into quiet hunger. From a spiritual perspective, this keeps the inner world in a permanent state of noise. The heart is never given the stillness it needs to speak. This is why the masters said that excessive eating leads to excessive sleeping, and excessive sleeping leads to loss. Not loss of productivity, but loss of perception. And once the heart grows accustomed to this heaviness, another danger slips in unnoticed. A danger that does not come from how much you eat, but from the atmosphere in which you eat. That is where the third food waits. The third food that weakens the spiritual heart is the most subtle of all. It hides in plain sight. It does not announce itself as excess or impurity. It arrives quietly, wrapped in routine, culture, and convenience. This is the food of heedlessness, ghafla. It is not defined by what you eat, nor by how much you eat, but by the state in which the food is prepared, served, and consumed. Ibn Arabi and the Sufi masters taught that nothing in existence is empty of meaning. Everything carries a trace of the state in which it was handled. When food is prepared in a state of presence, care, and remembrance, it nourishes more than the body. When it is prepared in stress, anger, resentment, or complete forgetfulness of God, it carries that atmosphere forward. Think of how common this is today. Meals prepared in a rush, in irritation, in environments driven by profit, pressure, and noise. Food eaten while scrolling, arguing, or numbing oneself with distraction. Eating becomes automatic, something done without awareness, without gratitude, without pause. Have you ever eaten a meal and felt strangely agitated afterward, even though the food itself was not unhealthy, or felt full, yet oddly empty? The Sufis understood this as spiritual transfer, not in a dramatic or mystical way, but in a deeply human one. Emotional states leave impressions. Hands carry intention. Atmospheres imprint themselves on what passes through them. The heart is sensitive to this, even when the mind is not. There are stories of the early masters refusing food not because it was unlawful, but because they sensed heaviness in the state surrounding it. For them, eating was an act of intimacy. They guarded it carefully. Most of us do not have that level of sensitivity, but the effect still accumulates. Over time, consuming food surrounded by heedlessness dulls the heart's alertness. Remembrance becomes mechanical. Prayer feels distant. The inner world fills with static. This is why distraction feels so normal after many meals. The body is fed, but the heart is starved. Imagine the heart as a sponge. Whatever you soak it in, that is what it releases when pressure comes. If you soak it in stress, rush, and forgetfulness, that is what spills out in impatience, irritation, and spiritual fatigue. And here is the difficult truth. In modern life, total avoidance of heedless environments is almost impossible. We live among them. We work within them. We depend on them. But Ibn Arabi did not teach withdrawal from life. He taught awareness within life. The danger of this third food is not that it destroys faith overnight. It slowly replaces presence with habit. It makes the world feel solid and overwhelming, while the unseen feels distant and abstract. Over time, the heart stops reaching. And when the heart stops reaching, it forgets why it was created. This is the most dangerous food of all, not because it is forbidden, but because it is invisible. You consume it daily without noticing, until numbness begins to feel like peace. So the question becomes unavoidable. If these three foods weaken the heart, how does one live in the modern world without being consumed by them? The answer is not fear. It is return. And that return begins with transforming the most ordinary act of your day into an act of remembrance. The path of the Sufis is never one of despair. It is always a path of return. After identifying what clouds the heart, Ibn Arabi does not leave the seeker burdened with fear or guilt. He offers something far more practical and far more compassionate, a way to live within the world without allowing the world to harden the heart. The antidote is not avoidance alone. Total purity is impossible in modern life. The antidote is transformation. It begins with intention. Before any food touches the tongue, there is a moment, a small pause that most people rush past. In that pause, you decide whether eating will be an unconscious habit or a conscious act. Ibn Arabi emphasized that intention is not a thought, it is a direction of the heart. When you pause before eating, even for a breath, you reclaim agency. You remind yourself, this food is not here by accident, it is provision, it is mercy, it is a trust. This is where halal and tayyib become more than labels. Halal is not only about ingredients, it is about conscience, about striving to earn through means that do not wound your own heart or the hearts of others. Food purchased with honesty carries a quiet ease. It satisfies more deeply, even when it is simple. But Ibn Arabi was also realistic. He knew that no one controls every link in the chain. You may not know the state of the person who prepared your meal. You may not always be able to avoid rushed or heedless environments. This is why remembrance, dhikr, is central to the antidote. When you say Bismillah, you are not reciting a habit. You are declaring dependence. You are acknowledging that nourishment does not come from the food alone, but from the one who allows it to sustain you. This remembrance acts like a filter. It softens what is heavy. It clarifies what is muddled. Then comes how you eat. The Sufis ate slowly, not as an aesthetic choice but as awareness. They listened to their bodies. They stopped before fullness. They left space not as deprivation but as invitation, space for breath, space for lightness, space for the heart to remain awake. When eating becomes mindful, gluttony loses its grip naturally. You notice satisfaction earlier. You feel when enough has arrived. The body becomes a partner, not an enemy. Over time, something subtle changes. Meals no longer pull you downward. They stabilize you. They support your worship instead of competing with it. Prayer feels lighter. Remembrance feels less forced. The heart begins to soften again. This is not instant transformation. It is gradual. Some days you will forget. Some days you will overeat. Some days the world will rush you. What matters is returning. Every conscious meal polishes the mirror a little more. Every moment of gratitude scrapes away a layer of rust. Slowly, quietly, the heart remembers its original sensitivity. And when the heart becomes sensitive again, it begins to respond. You feel it in small ways first: greater patience, deeper stillness, a sudden tenderness where numbness once lived. These are not dramatic signs. They are signs of life. And life, once it returns, continues to grow. The question then becomes, what does a living heart feel like in daily life? That is where we turn next. When the heart starts to recover, it does not announce itself loudly. There are no sudden visions or dramatic changes. What returns first is something far more subtle and far more precious. Sensitivity. You begin to notice that your inner world is no longer as dull as it once was. Prayer feels lighter, even when it is short. Remembrance no longer feels like a task you force upon yourself, but something your heart leans toward naturally. The resistance that once sat in your chest begins to loosen. You may notice this change outside of worship before you notice it within it. Your reactions soften. You pause before speaking. Irritation still comes, but it passes more quickly. You feel more present in conversations, less hurried inside. Have you ever noticed how a clean window makes even ordinary light feel brighter? This is what happens when the mirror of the heart begins to clear. The world does not change, but how you perceive it does. For some, the first sign is emotional. Tears return easily, not from sadness, but from recognition. A verse you've heard 100 times suddenly feels close again. A moment of kindness touches you more deeply than it used to. You feel moved in ways you thought were gone. For others, the change appears as stillness, a calm after meals instead of heaviness, a quieter mind at night, a sense that life feels less abrasive, even when it remains demanding. These are not signs of perfection, they are signs of connection. Ibn Arabi taught that the heart's natural state is receptivity. Hardness is not its default. It is something acquired through neglect and overload. When the causes of that hardness are reduced, the heart does not need to be forced open. It opens on its own. Of course, there will be setbacks, days when you eat without awareness, days when stress pulls you back into habit, days when the old heaviness returns. This does not mean you have failed. It means you are human. The difference now is that you recognize the signs. You know what dulls you and what restores you. You no longer blame your faith when your heart feels distant. You examine your nourishment, your pace, your presence. And slowly, a deeper trust begins to form. Trust that God did not make the path confusing. Trust that guidance is woven into daily life. Trust that even something as ordinary as eating can either veil the heart or polish it. This is the quiet mercy of the teaching. You realize that protecting your heart does not require dramatic change. It requires attentiveness, returning again and again to awareness, choosing life in small moments. Because the heart is not revived by force. It is revived by care. And when you begin to care for it properly, it responds, gently, faithfully, and on time. Now all that remains is a single question. One that follows you beyond this moment and into your next meal. So before your next meal, pause for a moment. Notice how some foods leave you lighter, more present, while others quietly weigh on your heart. Have you ever experienced a meal that changed your inner state in ways you couldn't explain at the time? If this reflection resonated with you, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to Voice of Sufism, and turn on the bell icon so you don't miss future stories exploring the hidden meanings woven into everyday life. We'd also love to hear from you. Share your thoughts or experiences in the comments. Your reflection may help someone else notice a sign they've been overlooking. And if you'd like to continue this journey, you'll see related videos appearing on your screen now. Until next time, watch what you feed your heart.